I've been riding the 2023 Kona Honzo ST steel hardtail for the past year, and I've really enjoyed it. It's actually been seeing way more miles than my full suspension Santa Cruz, and I have to say I really haven't missed the full squish all that much for most local trails around SoCal. Now, over the past few months, I've used the Honzo as a platform for several videos, including the boost crank video, the fork travel change video, a build video, and then some initial ride impressions, but I haven't really reviewed the Honzo yet. So in this video, a semi-long-term review on the Kona Honzo ST, including all the things that I like, and the one thing keeping me from really loving this bike. So I built up this bike in mid-2023 with pretty middle-of-the-road components. The frame is the steel Honzo in size medium. The colorway is Turismo Olive, which is like this metallic green gold color that I really like. And it's got a Shimano Dior 1x12 drivetrain with an 11 to 51 tooth cassette, SLX cranks, and a 30 tooth chainring from Wolf Tooth, along with some resin 1-up pedals. The brakes are also Dior hydraulic brakes, and everything with the exception of the P&W Loam dropper is cabled externally for convenience. Now the wheels are the Hunt XC wide wheels with a Terravale A-line 29 by 2.5 inch rear tire and a Honcho 29 by 2.6 front tire, both set up tubeless. Now the fork is a RockShox Revelation from 2018 that was reduced from 150 mil down to 140 millimeters of travel. And the finishing kit consists of a basic specialized bridge saddle. This one just happens to fit me pretty well. Some 1-up grips, a set of E13 alloy handlebars, and some color accents from Wolf Tooth throughout. Now I have to say that the bike is really fun to ride. I've got the adjustable dropout slid all the way forward for the shortest rear end possible, which of course makes wheelies and manuals more fun. The front end doesn't feel as slack as the 66-degree head tube angle and 110 millimeter trail figure would suggest. Now it's definitely a bit of a challenge to keep it going in a straight line on steep climbs, but I actually wouldn't want the head tube angle that much steeper since I prefer to have the stability when flying downhill. Now technical climbs in our area aren't super common, but even with a somewhat deep bottom bracket drop of 63 millimeters, I rarely get any pedal strikes on our local trails. Which actually leads me to mention the types of rides that I've been doing on this bike. So far it's mostly been greens and blues and not super rocky terrain. Now for those of you familiar with this area, I mainly ride the bike on Fullerton Loop, Turnbull Canyon, we do a lot at Whiting Ranch, and on a few occasions Santiago Oaks, and once up and down Monroe Truck Trail up in Glendora. Now a lot of these trail systems are pretty smooth and flowy and frankly perfect for a bike like the Honzo. Now I will say that the trails with the most challenging terrain that I've ridden this bike on are Santiago Oaks and Monroe Truck Trail. And it's on these trails where the terrain gets rockier and more rowdy that I really start to notice one thing in particular, which is the harshness in the frame. Now, I'm fully aware that a full suspension bike would most certainly take care of this issue, but I've also ridden other hardtails that ride much softer than the Honzo ST. Now, I really hate to say it, but as hardtails go, the Honzo steel version actually rides pretty harsh. Now, the thing is, when I bought the frame, I specifically sought out the steel version for that mythical, smooth, and damped ride feel, but unfortunately, all I really discovered is that not all steel is real. Stupid, sorry. Anyways, I know that if I lengthen the dropouts a bit, I might get a little bit more compliance out of the rear end, but looking at the frame, it's pretty clear that the Honzo is built up to be really stout. Even though the chainstays are pretty narrow and flattened, there's still this extra support bridge across the seat post interface. There's also this giant seat post gusset, which is actually quite common on some hardtails. And then there's the chainstay yoke, which looks to be just a solid piece of metal running across the back of the bottom bracket. Now all of this leads to a bike that feels pretty overbuilt, at least for the type of riding that I do, and even with big chunky 2.5 inch tires set to like 19-20 psi, I can still definitely feel the harshness. And then of course there's the type of steel used. Now people often regurgitate the phrase steel is real, alluding to that soft and damped ride quality of steel as a material, but what's less frequently mentioned is the type of steel, and probably more importantly, the butting profile of the tubes, the wall thicknesses of the tubes, and the actual frame design. Now, I'm not actually a material scientist, but I do know that low to mid-range 4130 chromoly steel welded up with these extra gussets and solid support pieces is certainly not going to feel nearly as compliant as a higher-end steel frame with a more thoughtful design. Now, like I said, I really enjoy riding the Honzo. The geometry suits me well, and I've really come to like riding a hardtail as opposed to a full suspension bike on most trails. I just wish the Honzo ST was a little bit less harsh. Now, of course, ride feel is subjective, and some of you may love your steel Honzo, and that's great. But for me, I'd really be curious to see if I can somehow isolate the ride quality of the frame itself and compare the steel Honzo to another steel hardtail and see if I can tease out an actual difference in ride feel. In other words, I'm wondering if I can take everything that's on the Honzo ST as it is now and just swap it all over to a premium, high-end steel hardtail frame, and make maybe a few videos about my findings. Now this is a Newhouse Metalworks Hummingbird in size M+, and it's a work of art is what it is. Hand welded in Marin County, California by Nick Newhouse with custom design elements by Daniel Yang. This frame is largely considered to be the epitome of modern aggressive XC hardtail design, and I bought one to test out on the channel. Now this thing has been praised by just about everyone, including Steve over at Hardtail Party, who ranks this particular bike the most supple hardtail that he's ever ridden. But that's not the only reason I decided to pick one up. I actually got a chance to ride with Daniel from Newhouse and his friend Yuan late last year, and I rode a prototype iteration of the Hummingbird that changed my entire perspective on what a hardtail mountain bike could be. I mean, I'm not really exaggerating here. I honestly felt like I was riding a full suspension XC bike. It was really compliant, really comfortable, incredibly smooth. The geometry was spot on, and it's honestly a bike I've been thinking about ever since. So the plan is to eventually build this thing into a dream hardtail of sorts, and I'll definitely do a video once that happens. But before we go dropping more dollars on this bike, the first thing I want to do is actually to just take everything on the Honzo ST exactly as it is in its current state and just swap it over to the Hummingbird. So I can theoretically isolate the effect of the frame, and I really think that'll be an interesting video that will hopefully highlight the differences between two steel frames. Now I realized I've kind of cannibalized this video, which started out as a review of the Kona Honzo ST, so let me wrap that up by restating the fact that I actually really do like the Honzo. For a $600 mass-produced chromoly frame, I think it's pretty decent value for a decent mid-range frame, and I don't want to downplay the fact that I enjoy riding this bike a lot. But I couldn't pass on the opportunity to build up a Newhouse, so here we are. Now I'm not planning to put out a new video in this series every week. More likely the Newhouse videos will be interspersed with other videos over the next couple of months, but you can be sure that the budget versus baller steel frame video is in the works, along with probably a build video and a proper review of the Newhouse frame at the very least. All right, well that's going to do it for this one. Thanks again for watching, and thanks for subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. I'll see you next time.